Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of the NatureCity Podcast. I'm Carl Pradelli, your host, and I'm also the co-founder and CEO of NatureCity, having started the company over 20 years ago with my wife, Beth. And since then, it's been our pleasure to serve over 500,000 Americans by offering them the best supplements we can make. Today's episode is going to be a fun one. We're going to be talking about what I think is probably the most novel, unique joint health ingredient to come on the market in some time. I'd say at least 10 years. It's called TamaFlex. And it's a combination of something you probably have heard of, which is turmeric, the spice that contains the curcumin compound and other beneficial compounds. And it combines turmeric with something you may not have heard of, which is called tamarind seeds. And together, research is showing these work really well together. And to help us break it all down, we have Eric Anderson, who's the managing director at Next USA, who developed and owns the TamaFlex ingredient. Like me, Eric has a pretty long history in this industry. I think we've both been at this for over 20 years, and he's really earned my trust in that time because, like NatureCity, he really believes in best-in-class ingredients that have good quality scientific support, made responsibly and sustainably. All the things we look for when choosing ingredients and brands to work with. As an example of this, Eric, prior to his current position, he worked for a long time at MetaQ7 vitamin K2, which many of you and many NatureCity clients benefit from. And he really helped bring that ingredient to the forefront here in the United States. So, Eric, it's great to see you, and thank you for making time for us, and welcome.
Thanks, Carl. That was a wonderful introduction. Thank you so very much. It's really a pleasure to be here. We think the world of NatureCity, and this is very exciting to be invited to participate in your program. Thank you.
You're very welcome. So let's jump into it. As I mentioned, TamaFlex is a pretty unique ingredient. So how did it come about?
So I've been in the industry for many years, and we've always had a real desire to bring efficacious, clinically validated products to the industry, to the natural products industry. And part of that is saying, where are the needs? Where are the health needs? Where do folks need some extra assistance? At the end of the day, we're selling dietary supplements, right? We're supplementing the diet. So we try to get a varied diet, fruits, vegetables. We try to get as many healthy things as we can. But unfortunately, we live in the West, and we are just bombarded with processed foods that are pro-inflammatory, full of omega-6s and nasty things like high fructose corn syrup and hydrogenated vegetable oils. And so we're inundated with lots of pro-inflammatory ingredients. And we are an aging population. So one of the real health issues for Americans today are joint healths, where that tends to manifest first is in the knees. And so we're looking at this category saying, okay, how can we best address this? And in the industry, there's wonderful ingredients, things like boswellia, like curcumin, and they have different mechanisms of action. So we set about saying, how can we combine what's really recognized in nature that provides benefits and bring something that is comprehensive to the market that can really help support people, help to balance healthy inflammation levels. And so we set about a project of discovery. And one of the things that came out of this was a recognition that tamarind seed has a wonderful natural inflammatory balancing benefit. And so we started to pursue that, and we looked at things that would also complement that. And we came up with turmeric. Both of these herbs are found in India. They're commonly consumed. There's a real recognition of historic use. And so it was great to begin our development process using these natural Ayurvedic herbs.
So I'm curious who stumbled upon tamarind seeds, because frankly, I've never seen that in using a supplement before.
Well, the lore, right? The history that we've heard is that an Ayurvedic practitioner, a doctor who studies traditional herbal medicine from India, was visiting a fairly remote village, a town, and he noticed that the folks were really ambulatory. They were really active. The older people they weren't demonstrating the typical soreness, stiffness that you might expect. Um, as the practitioner was looking into this, they noticed that the folks were using tamarind seeds. They were grinding them up to augment their flour and used in their cooking. And so they were getting a really nice amount of this. Now, tamarind seeds are consumed pretty commonly in India and in Asia. Tamarind is very often used in sweet and sour, and that tends to be another component of the pod. The seeds themselves find their way into, it can be roasted like a sunflower seed into chutneys and different preparations. So they're consumed, but this particular village was consuming a lot. And so that led to a course of evaluation. What's happening? Why does this work? So starting with cellular studies and looking at how within the cells the cell would react to different stimuli. We saw that there was a very strong not only antioxidant property to tamarind seed, but also a nice supporting of inflammation property in the tamarind seed. And that really set about the project.
Yeah, it's really interesting because, you know, a number of like ingredients have started this way, right? They look at a local population that seems to have some type of unique, health characteristic, maybe not experienced by others, and they just start looking at their diets and try to find out what's unique. I mean, I remember back in the day, that's really how hyaluronic acid kind of came on the map. I remember there was like a village outside Tokyo that ate these special type of sweet potato, right? That just triggered a lot of HA production in the body. And they said, wow, maybe that's why these people have great skin, great, much better joint health than some of the surrounding things. And it sounds like it was the same thing with this village in terms of the tamarind seed.
Yeah, it's a great story, and it's one that I think the natural products industry. It's a real service that we provide to our customers, to our consumers. If you think about our friends over in England with the coronation upcoming, thinking about scurvy, right? Why were they called limeys? Well, they're off on the ocean for months at a time with no vitamin C, so the sailors began taking citrus with them to get the vitamin C so they wouldn't develop scurvy. And that's an indication of where you have a deficiency. But there are many great stories of where you have a greater than adequate amount that provides additional health benefits, omega-3 fatty acids, for example. I mean, that's how it started, looking at the Inuit. Yeah. So in this case, we can look at communities that are having great health outcomes, identify what they're consuming, and bring that to market, but most importantly, to clinically validate, the clinical being human studies, validate in humans that you are delivering the health benefit that is promised. And I think that's core to what we do. It's evidence-based nutrition.
No, so let's maybe talk a little bit about the science, because it's pretty impressive. I found it pretty impressive what you've found once you started studying this in some placebo-controlled clinical studies. What I really like about what you did is, you combine some of the traditional, clinical measurements, like there's something called the Womack index, often used for joint health ingredients, which is great. It's a little subjective though. It can be subjective, usually a big placebo group reaction for joint health ingredients, especially at the start. That's why you need definitely need a placebo controlled study. But you also, what really caught my attention is you also really combine that with some real everyday joint performance measures, like just walking and climbing stairs. So maybe you could talk a little bit. I think you're about to publish your third study, maybe now starting with the first, you could talk a little bit about what you guys have found.
Sure, absolutely. So our company also has roots in Europe with some of our partners are in Oslo. Our R&D group and manufacturing group is in India. I'm sitting in with you in the United States here. It really is a global effort. But we're very fortunate that our research team, when we sat down and looked at this, said, let's take a real comprehensive approach to this. You're absolutely right, especially in joint health studies, the placebo effect, where the participant wants to see a benefit, really impacts the outcomes. So you have to show a difference between the placebo group taking the sugar pill and some type of an inert pill to the active group, which is taking your supplement. And it has to be double blind. The pill has to look the same so that the person taking the supplement or the placebo doesn't know, and the practitioner who's giving it to the participant doesn't know. So you're trying to take bias out of the program. At the end of the day, then you can do a statistical analysis. Was the change in the active group greater than the change in the placebo group? Comparing the two, and was it statistically significant? Was it large enough that you would expect that every time you did that study that it was statistically significant? And typically you're looking for a value of p.05, which means 95% of the time, if you redid that study the same way, you would get the exact same results. So it gives it a real confidence. So we said, okay, well, what can we study? Well, let's look at what's recognized within the healthcare profession, things like WOMAC, WOMAC, which is a measurement of lower body mobility, flexibility, comfort, very well recognized. We looked at things like, the visual analog scale, Gaines functional index. These are administered by the practitioner, by the researcher. So they're somewhat subjective if someone's making an analysis of it. And so we said, okay, well, what is a little more objective? Well, let's look at performance. Let's measure how far the participants can walk in 6 minutes, which doesn't seem like a long time, unless you're running late for your airplane, and 6 minutes is forever.
That's right.
How far can you walk? How quickly can you walk over 6 minutes? How many times can you go up and down stairs? A chair stand test, sit down, stand up. How many times can you do that in a defined period? These are objective. You either can or you can't. And what we saw at the beginning was everybody started to do a little bit better, but by 2 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 weeks, the active group was becoming dramatically better compared to the placebo group. They really saw a physical improvement, which would be aerobic, right? They can walk farther.
Yep.
And lower body strength to sit and stand. So you're actually improving the physicality. And then the third group that we looked at of measurements are biomarkers. So there are things that you can study in the blood and in the urine. If you go to your doctor and they take blood, they're looking at many different things. Well, there are markers that we can look at to assess not only inflammation in the joints, but also systemic inflammation. Because at the end of the day, we're talking about balance, right? You have to have inflammation. It plays a role in allowing our joints to articulate. You need a little bit of inflammation in there. It plays a huge role in immune response. Right. So we need inflammation, but we don't need excess inflammation. So
that's right. I mean,
keep it in balance.
Well, it's interesting because, people often talk about inflammation as if it's a villain, right? But, without a healthy inflammation response, you would die, right? You would not be able to react to threats and so on. But yes, when, especially as we age and as we all age, and, that system can go into overdrive at times when it doesn't need to. And that's what we're trying to do with our supplements, is really help, maintain that healthy inflammation response. Which in turn, hopefully, should lead to better joint health and joint function. And just to clarify, of course, when you were mentioning the active group, you were talking about the people taking the TamaFlex ingredient.
The TamaFlex. In our first study, with an eye to our friends in Europe, where their regulations are a little bit different, they want to see studies in populations that are healthy.
Sure.
which is a little difficult. If you want to see a statistical difference, you have to see a change. So if you start with a healthy person, how do you show a difference? If you want to look at a slimming product, you start with someone who's overweight because it makes it easier to measure a change, right? So we started with healthy people, but we asked them to do physical performance assessments, walking up and down stairs, to induce discomfort, right? So we're fairly active ambulatory in the United States, but say you go out and you go hiking, or you turn over your garden, or you go skiing and you get home and you're sore. That's not a disease. That's your body is uncomfortable. So we induced discomfort to compare the two. And that was the first study. And that showed statistically significant benefits. And that published a few years ago. Right. The second study we conducted, we looked at folks that had existing discomfort, mild joint discomfort. So not a full-blown condition, but I'm sore.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that the second group was kind of age 40 to 70, I believe, the population in that group, so they're starting to feel the effects of aging, right? And especially if you're active, you're going to feel some discomfort, right?
And in that case, if you start a little bit uncomfortable, you're going to notice the benefit faster. And that second study established the 5-day claim. At just 5 days, and clearly up to 5 days, it was improving, but at just 5 days, the comfort was improved in a statistically significant measurement, which is showing an absolute improvement in how these folks feel, right? Sure. And that improvement continued throughout the length of the study. Over 2 months, it continued to get better. At some point, it would have plateaued. We didn't go for a year, but it continued to improve. Sure. And then in the third study, which is publishing now, we really wanted to validate that fast-acting activity, as well as validate in folks with existing soreness that it can improve, and that improvement is maintained. It's not like sometimes something will you have a very rapid onset and it wears off. What we see is that consistently over time, the benefit is maintained. And that really improves not only the comfort, but you can be more active. It improves your quality of life. We can get off the couch. The plague is over, right? We're allowed out of our houses. Let's get back to life. And doing that, let's do it comfortably.
Yeah, and that's I think it's important to note that there is this kind of, slow but steady improvement, kind of each day, each week. You, in this case, we're taking TamaFlex. 5 days, I think you would indicate was the first day you saw a significant first measurement period where you experienced, statistically significant improvements in many of the things you were looking at. But again, that's what a clinical assessment, and, someone taking a product shouldn't give up after 5 days if they're not feeling something. That's just a start. Is that fair?
Yes, absolutely. This is our supplements are not pharmaceuticals. They're not extreme in their activity. They're not. They're looking to provide a nutritional support for balance. So if you take an over-the-counter painkiller, you would expect it to work very, very quickly. But you also don't want to take it for more than a day or so, because they're not designed for long-term use, right? Right. But the dietary supplements, which are supporting balance within our bodies, that are supporting a systemic approach, that are supporting the foods that we're consuming and the activity that we're pursuing. This is something that is more modulated, and you expect it to improve, and you expect it to maintain. At the end of the day, we have to deliver the benefit.
That's right. And it's interesting. I was looking at some of the data, especially in the second study you made, and I was really, really intrigued by these functional performance measures. The walking distance, how far you could walk in 6 minutes, and how many times you go up a flight of stairs. And I can't remember the time it was, but some fixed period of time. And again, you did it versus a placebo group, so it wasn't just people getting used to walking or people getting used to the activity. But it was pretty stark. It was not only was it statistically significant, but it was meaningful, right? I mean, I think I calculated in the walking, for example, those taking TamaFlex, I think it was 250 milligrams of TamaFlex, if I'm recalling correctly. I think the distance they were able to walk in 6 minutes improved by like 13% or something along those lines.
Yeah, I think it was even a little better than that.
Yeah,
But it was not just statistically significant. I would say it's clinically relevant.
yeah,
The
yeah,
doctors that are conducting the studies are saying, "Wow, my patient has a real difference." Right? My study participant is demonstrably better off after the study than before the study compared to
yeah,
placebo.
yeah. And again, I think the placebo group, was like maybe a 2-3% improvement. So clearly, um, much better results taking TamaFlex, which is what you would hope.
So to your point, in the stair climb test, um, in the studies, each of the studies we had the stair climb test. The initial test was either at 5 days or 14 days, and the placebo did better. The participants want to have a good outcome, so they're trying really hard.
Right.
But then you see after the first time point, the second, third, and fourth time points start to fall off because they're like, well, I'm trying really hard to do this activity and it's making me more uncomfortable. Right. So it dropped off. One of the very interesting measures we did was a measurement of how far the joint can articulate. How far can your knee bend? And they use a piece of equipment called a goniometer, and it really is just like a protractor. It's how many degrees. And the active group saw a 4 to 5 degree improvement in how far the joint could actually bend. So you're improving the physicality of the joint, the structure of the joint. And that's very objective. And, getting up, getting out of bed, putting your shoes on, it makes a difference.
Makes a huge difference. And the other thing I think you introduced in your second study, which also caught my attention when I first read it, was you want to see the effect of TamaFlex on being able to support healthy cartilage, joint cartilage. So you measured something called urinary CTX2, which I believe just looks at fragments of collagen, which break down from cartilage, and just see how many is getting excreted in urine, if I'm describing that correctly. And again, pretty impressive results that you were able to see with those taking TamaFlex.
Yes, absolutely. So there's really a couple of mechanisms that relate to that. One mechanism, of course, is as these are natural herbs, is you have a natural antioxidant benefit. What does an antioxidant do? Well, one thing it does is it absorbs reactive oxygen species, ROS. And that really, ROS, think of as little irritants in the cell, which are disrupting the cell function. And cells make tissues, make organs and muscles, right? So reducing that is a nice thing. Helping to balance systemic inflammation is very important as well. And so in our studies, we looked at things like TNF alpha, which is an inflammatory marker. We looked at MMP3 activity, matrix metalloproteinases, MMPs. They're little enzymes that selectively break down cartilage and even your synovial fluid, the fluid that lubricates our joints. And so that comes down a little bit. And the net result is you're changing you're supporting the integrity of the joint itself, so you don't have as much aggressive activity against the cartilage and the connective tissues. You're taking you're taking that inflammation and oxidative stress. You're taking all of that down into healthy levels, and that as a result reduces the breakdown of the cartilage, which is measured by CTX2, and that it's a well and new recognized measurement of the health of the cartilage. And so it was really great to show in our study that you can positively impact that. And it's an integral part to the mechanism of how the product works.
Absolutely. And, it's interesting because certainly the immediate, and by immediate, I mean, within a month or so, or maybe starting as soon as 5 days, it's interesting to feel a little better, or be able to walk further and faster, and be able to climb stairs easier. All those things you measured. But respect to the cartilage, that's really even more about the longer term health of the joint and protecting the joint for the longer term. So, TamaFlex, you're really getting some immediate, short term benefits, but for the long term, you're really protecting as you said, the integrity of the whole joint space.
Yes. So let's talk about the mechanism for just a second.
Yeah.
One of the markers we looked at was a marker called C-reactive protein. And many of our listeners probably have heard of this before, or highly sensitive C-reactive protein. This, for decades, has been recognized as a marker of systemic inflammation and cardiovascular inflammation. So we talked about omega-3s and omega-6s, right? So if we're getting a lot of these omega-6s, which are inducing inflammation, and not enough of the omega-3s that you would get from things like fish oils and other sources, then your balance starts to fall apart. And when the balance of the good omega-3s, things like eicosapentaenoic pentanoic acid, EPA, and arachidonic acid, AA, and omega-6, when those get out of balance, then you have too much omega-6. And that starts to cleave from the cell membrane, and it gets out into the system, and it starts to create issues. But it's not just your joints, it's your entire body. So if we can show that we're bringing those inflammatory mediators down back into healthy levels, we're not only addressing the joint health, but we're addressing cardiovascular health, we're addressing respiratory health, we're addressing mental acuity, we're helping to get the body back in balance. But very specifically, when arachidonic acid starts to break down, it goes down two pathways. It goes down the COX-2 pathway, which most of us recognize from things like aspirin, ibuprofen, NSAIDs. They target COX-2. And then the 5-LOX pathway, which was really believed to be a respiratory inflammatory issue. And so things like Singulair and Advair targeted that. Now, those are pharmaceuticals, right? We're not talking about drugs, but that's the mechanism. What we're talking about is getting those back into balance. And so the tamarind works very nicely on the 5-LOX enzyme, helps to modulate that, helps to get it back into balance. And the turmeric root works very nicely on the COX-2 enzyme, getting that back into balance. And then we see a synergy between the two. So we're really balancing the whole body. It's most obvious in the joints. The knees hit first. What about the hips? What about the elbows? What about the shoulders, right? We're addressing the whole body health. It's just easiest to demonstrate that in the joints, in the knees.
No question about it. I mean, I think that, as always, there's a reason these substances exist in the body, but it's about maintaining, healthy activity level and healthy levels that is what you're referring to by, modulating and, trying to keep things where they should be. And yes, and that's one of the beauties you've seen with TamaFlex. And so really you first did the kind of the scales you mentioned, like the WOMAC score. You did some of these biomarkers to look at inflammatory health, as well as, the cartilage health. And then you did the range of motion test, which I can't remember. What's that called again?
So it's a measurement of how far the joint will bend, the articulation of the joint.
Okay.
And it's you use a goniometer to measure it. So you can actually do this at home.
Yeah, no, and you have that, and then lastly, you have all these great joint performance and joint function tests, which affect our daily lives. I mean, you really covered the full gamut of things to really measure, and that's, again, that's why I was very impressed with the work you did, and I'm not sure you left anything out.
We have to give credit to the researchers. We were almost too focused on comfort and helping the person feel better, that we weren't really recognizing the end result. So you feel better, then what happens? Right. So within these tests, we said, well, people can walk further. They can be more aerobic. We're increasing the aerobic capacity. They can stand and sit, go up and down stairs better. We're increasing the lower body strength as a result of being able to do more. You're getting stronger. And so these are really quality of life impacts that go above and beyond just trying to help promote comfort.
No question about it. No question about it. So you're about to publish your third study. And when I say about, I think we're probably days, weeks away from that happening. Can you tell us a little bit about what you found in that piece of work?
Sure, absolutely. So in the first study, we looked at healthy participants creating some discomfort to see, is there a difference compared to placebo? And it's important to have a placebo group. You can compare to baseline. Where did you start and where did you end as an individual? But it is much more powerful to have a group of people compared to a group of people not using the active. It shows a real difference. The second study, we looked at folks that had some existing discomfort, mild to moderate discomfort, and we showed that it had a pretty rapid onset, but that the improvement continued over the course of the study. And the third study is the study that really validated the first two. We showed it again. We repeated it. We showed that it can be reproduced with the same benefits. Again, looking at the physician assessments, WOMAC, Visual Analog Scale, Les Gaines Functional Index, looking at walking, stairs, standing and sitting, how far do the joints bend, the physicality, looking at the biomarkers, highly sensitive reactive protein, C-reactive protein, which is systemic measurement, interleukin 1B, interleukin 10. These are modulators of healthy inflammation levels, and we have positive impacts on those. And as you mentioned earlier, CTX2. Are we preserving the integrity of that cartilage and connective tissue? And yes, in fact, it was. The other interesting thing about this study is we used an active comparator in the third group. So what's an active comparator? Well, we took a very good Boswellia serrata extract, and we took a very good curcumin extract. It comes from Turmeric, but it's a 95% curcuminoids. Both are available in the market. And we dosed them quite high, 333 Boswellia, 666 milligrams of curcumin, 1,000 milligrams a day, a gram, big pill. So we actually used 2, so you could swallow it. And you know what? The Boswellia curcumin active comparator showed benefit. It just took much longer before you saw the onset. And the actual benefit was about a third in some of the better measurements. So a gram
compared to TamaFlex, right?
Compared to TamaFlex. So a gram of really good quality Boswellia curcumin compared to 250 milligrams of TamaFlex. TamaFlex works faster, dramatically better statistical significance, dramatically better measurements and outcomes at a smaller dose. Wow. So it's a little bit, you want to prove that your product works, why bring in an active comparator? Well, to show that in comparison to what's in the market today, there's good stuff out there. This one is best in class.
Well, that's pretty exciting. And by the way, I mean, it takes some courage to go out there and compare yourself to one of the leading competitors, right?
Because you have no control. Once you put in the clinical environment, you just have to wait until they're done.
Right.
What happened?
Exactly. Of course, look, to put in perspective, of course, it's one study, I'm sure there's going to be some people who quibble with, well, we could use this brand of curcumin, this, that brand of, who knows? But look, I mean, I think, and again, like you said, it's not like, because we like Boswellia and curcumin too. We think they're great, but so it's not like they don't work. They work. It just seems like the TamaFlex combination, which we've been talking about, its uniqueness, seems to work maybe a little better, a little faster, at least on average in these folks. Is that fair?
Yeah, what's really interesting about these extracts is turmeric is most often seen in the market in a 95% curcuminoid. So you're really concentrating on 3 actives that are found in the root. But we believe that there are a lot of phytonutrients in the turmeric root. So we use a water extract that pulls out the water-soluble actives and ethanol alcohol, organic alcohol, which pulls out the alcohol-soluble actives. So we get the curcuminoids, but we get other polyphenols, lignans, we get other really nice things out of that plant, out of the root. And the same thing with the turmeric, or with the tamarind extract, with the seeds. We're using water and alcohol extracts to pull all of the available nutrients out of those to get the broadest profile. So we call it a full spectrum extract. We're pulling everything we can out. And we didn't really mention this, but the first thing that you have to do is put those compounds into safety testing. So you have to look at cellular aberrations, genes, mutagenicity, genotoxicity, short-term use, high dose use, dose response. And we've published all this safety data. In addition to the historic use, people have been consuming this for millennia. On top of that, our full spectrum extracts have been shown to be absolutely safe, well tolerated. In our clinical studies, the contraindications were no different than placebo. And so we know that this is something that can be taken comfortably on a daily basis for a long period of time, and not have those concerns with contraindications that you don't want.
Yeah. I mean, that's very important. I was going to ask you about that. I mean, so nothing really is turned up yet in any of the work you've done, human clinicals or otherwise, that raises concern in combination with any. Is any concern of people with sometimes, like with curcumin, there's some concern maybe with taking blood thinners and TamaFlex? Have you considered that?
We haven't seen that at all. Of course, with any supplement, if you're pregnant, nursing, breastfeeding, if you're on other medications, always check with your physician. Yeah. Make sure that they're not going to have interaction. Yeah. Our product is regulated by the FDA as generally recognized as safe. So it can go into foods, it can go into supplements. Right. We've demonstrated that. When you go to do a clinical study, the first thing you have to show is that it's safe. There's not a concern with that. And the second thing you have to show is that there is a strong reason to do the study. You just don't want to subject humans to research without a reason. So right. We were able to show that it was safe, and that the use of the product can provide real health benefits, comfort, function, quality of life. So we're able to bring it to the market with a full published, it's in the public domain, safety data, and now 3 clinical studies in humans validating the efficacy and safety of the product.
Absolutely. No, that's terrific. And I really applaud you mentioning, I know I every time I go to see one of my doctors, I bring my list of supplements I take, and we always encourage clients to make sure your doctors are aware of what you're taking. So, I'm really excited to see your third clinical study, your third study. I don't know if you recall this, but about 2 years ago, after reviewing the work you had already done to that point, we made a change in our True Joint formula, our True Joint FLX formula, which now features TamaFlex as one of the key ingredients. But what we removed was curcumin and boswellia. So obviously, I had no idea you were about to undertake this third study and look at them head to head. But I'm glad to see the results were better. To defend curcumin and boswellia, there's lots of great research on those compounds for many different indications. We were just looking for something that was a little more efficacious, and we saw a nice synergy. And I think that that's largely due to addressing both the 5-LOX pathway as well as the COX-2 pathway, and together that gives us a really comprehensive approach to the breakdown of those omega-6s, and also powerful antioxidants to protect the cells and help with the cell Yeah. No,
activity.
I mean, yeah,
on our minds.
I agree completely. And, you know, big fans of Kirkman and the Boswellia, no doubt about that. We just found that TamaFlex brought some unique attributes to the table, and we could do it more cost effectively. We were able actually to lower the price of our supplement, our True Joint FLX supplement, quite substantially by making that switch. And obviously, we've been very excited to have the partnership together, and very excited that you continue to invest in more research to further validate, the effects of TamaFlex, as well, of course, as the safety. So, Eric, before we wrap up, is there anything else we should know about TamaFlex?
No, but I just would say to your audience that one of the reasons we appreciate working with Nature City is because you adhere to the tenets of the natural products industry. Let's bring ingredients and products to market that are based on science, that have validation, that provide real health benefits. I mean, this is what our industry is all about. And we can make a difference, right? We went into this for a reason. We're not selling tobacco or pesticides, right? We're selling natural products to help people. And so we're just really honored to work with you. And we really appreciate the leadership position you take in industry and, carrying the flag for doing what's right. Thank you.
Well, thank you. That's, I really appreciate that acknowledgement. Look, and it's all about helping people at the end of the day, right? That's what we're here to do, and try to give them, as much information we can to help them make the best decisions for themselves. So, folks, again, we've been talking about TamaFlex. If you find it interesting, you can go visit the TamaFlex website, what's the URL for that, Eric?
TamaFlex.com, TAMAFLEX.com.
And as mentioned, our True Joint FLX product includes TamaFlex as one of the key ingredients. We use the same 250 milligrams that Eric has been using in the research we discussed today. If you're interested, you can read more about that at NatureCity.com. True Joint FLX, the product. In addition to TamaFlex, True Joint has some other great ingredients, also scientifically studied. Things like collagen, hyaluronic acid, chondroitin, as well as the, peractin ingredient as well. So great formula. Hope you check it out, and really appreciate you listening to today's episode. So until next week, this is Carl Pradelli, and we'll see you soon.